And we are live, he says, with hesitation and interpretation, as always. Welcome to this latest episode of Totally Unscripted. So, in a change to the scheduled program, we've got something slightly different. Unfortunately, Real Notterman, who was going to join us today, his wife isn't well, so we're on to plan B in terms of a show, but we're hoping to keep on topic, so we've basically got bits and pieces of Firebase to talk about. So, but before we do that, we've got some quite a few different news items that we'll just go through. So, the first one of this kind of follows on from the last show when we were speculating what was happening with new sites in terms of APIs, and lo and behold, Google have kind of given us a ray of hope with this recent update on to the Google Apps or now the Google Suite users. So the announcement was mainly about the fact that old sites was going to be deprecated and the process for moving across. But at the bottom of that post, there were a number of features that aren't in new sites right now, but they said they would implement. And the bottom one is probably the most important for us in the AppScript community, is API abilities. So do we, I take it we all welcome this news. I know, Steve, this is an area that you've been quite interested and vocal on. So
yes, because I've heard some rumblings of people not having confidence in using Google Sites as an intranet for the business and enterprise level. And it's good to hear that this list is now out to say, here are some things that are coming down the roadmap. So it's encouraging to see this.
So there's no dates on this. I think it sounded like we'd start seeing things by the end of the year. But positive progress. So moving on, next thing. So this is something that you picked up, Steve, from yesterday, that for Google admins, G Suite admins, there is a new console view that is showing activity based on AppScript and AppMaker if you're in the early access program. Steve, or anyone else, have you been able to access this and see what level of reporting you get? I'm going to take that as...
tested it yet, no. Well, based on what we can see from the screenshot, for now, it seems the reports are pretty simple, but I will be interested to know exactly what we can get if we use the download icon we can see on the screenshots. Yeah. But if we take a look at the announcement, it says that the feature will launch through the next days, so we should be able to test it pretty quickly.
So hopefully in the next show we'll be able to perhaps just pull out some of the data that we can see from that. It's been a while since we've had, I think, a big outage from AppScript, but they do happen. So this was quite a recent one on the 2nd of May. So Andrew Stillman, I think, was the first one to open the issue ticket on this. So there was an issue with the JSON parse within add-ons. I think, Steve, you were monitoring this one quite closely as well. How long does it take before the services were resumed?
Yeah, I lost my internet, so I had to go to mobile. It happened about 9 p.m. GMT time zone. It lasted about 2 to 3 hours. So depending on your user base, they were either affected during that time or they weren't. So hopefully not too bad. I know I had some users with my add-ons that were affected.
Yeah, well, optimistic side here is that recently there was another big issue affecting a lot of add-ons, scripts, due to errors in the properties service in AppScript. And it took, I think, at least 8 or 10 hours for Google to wake up simply and change something in their system. And after that, they say that they will be more reactive in the future. And indeed, this specific issue hasn't taken so long for Google to, well, it was rolled back very fast. And I think it's good. Even if it would be even better if we don't have to suffer such issues, if they're able to respond quickly, and if we don't have to wait for one of the Googlers to wake up because they are all working on the same time zone, it is better.
Yeah, just a comment. I think we've had 3 outages on property services quite recently. One of them involving cache as well, and I think that in each case it was the result of a change, and I think the last one they rolled back the change quite quickly, which was good. But property services is vital to pretty much anybody who has got scripts that they share out. So I think that certainly from my perspective, we do need to keep reporting very quickly every time that we see a property service issue coming up. Number one, so that people can realize that this is something that's a big deal and not just a kind of a little thing. And secondly, of course, so that we can get their attention rather quickly. This property service type thing is in my opinion, one of the worst things that can go wrong, because it affects, from a scripting perspective, because it affects everybody. So let's keep up the pressure every time that we see anything like this and keep following it up.
So is it me, or Martin seems to be a bit frozen?
Yeah, I think Martin's frozen.
And he has all the access on the presentation and so on. Well,
yeah, is that him that's showing that? Let me.
Yes, he's showing it.
Okay, and who's talking to it? Is it Martin, or is it someone?
It's supposed to be Martin.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess he's got a property service outage. Let me just ping him.
Hello. Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Yes.
Yes, you're back.
Oh, sorry, that was if I unmuted my headphones. Hello?
Yeah, we can.
As a quick sidebar, we are in a plan B. My entire house, my home office included, power outage. I had to go to mobile, and our host, who was running the show, was frozen.
It can only get better.
Okay, Martin, make it so. Make it better.
Did you talk much on authentication flow, the new flow?
No, we didn't. We were waiting for you to talk about that. So now you can.
So, previously you just went, users when they were prompted, they just went into kind of a scope of authorization. It's all been reskinned, and there's a new step where users select the account they want to use. So I don't know if this is related to, there was a quite publicized Google Docs phishing attack, which for once was not Google Script related. Romain, do you want to talk a bit more to this?
Yes, I thought it was interesting to mention that because for me, something like that was bound to happen at some point. Well, the first thing is that maybe in part due to app scripts and other tools using the Google APIs, people are they are used to authorize a lot of different applications. And here, this specific app or email was asking access to your world Gmail inbox and to your world Google Drive. And people authorize that without any issue, without as well. Maybe they thought it was maybe they wondered why it was asking that, but they still wanted the authorizations. And we've seen that it has spread very fast because every time someone was giving access to his Gmail account, this app was getting access to your contacts and was using the Gmail API to send the same emails to all your contacts. So up to 1,500 emails as it's the daily Gmail quota available. And then people were recipients were also giving the same access, and so on and so on. And so in some domains where a lot of people were receiving this email from their colleagues, it spread like crazy because each coworker was accepting and then sending the email to other coworkers, and so on and so on and so on. And for me, this is bound to happen again because people continue to be accept more, have to accept more and more authorizations like that every time they are using an add-on, an app on mobile, and so on. And here, as they don't have to give their password or anything, they just have to authorize the app to use their Gmail and Drive account. It's even well, they don't see any issue. People are more responsible when entering their password, but when simply clicking on an authorized button, they don't seem to care. And it was interesting because a lot of articles from tech blogs on the web say that it was incredible because the authorization page really looked like a standard Google page, and it was even from a google.com URL and so on. But yes, it was a real Google page because it was the standard URL used by Google to ask you to grant access to another app. And so indeed, because of all that, people seem to trust when they shouldn't. So I don't know. I think if I was trying to work on a phishing attack like that, it might have been way worse. And if other hackers are want to do the same, I don't think it will be difficult, and I don't really see a solution for Google about that. So yeah, I don't know if it will happen again, but for me, there's no reason why it shouldn't.
So if anybody's been affected by this, then the way to do it is to go to your authorized apps and find this application and remove the authorization that you've given it. I imagine that everybody's would have done that by now, but just in case.
No, well, in fact, you don't need to, because well, Google had to do something about that, so they shut down the app and so on. The all authorization that were given to a specific console project on the cloud platform, which have been shut down. Well, I think there were several projects, but anyway, it's done.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but
I think the other thing that happened is that the name, the has invited name that came up was actually someone from your contact list, right? So
yeah.
Therefore, you're likely to take it because it was someone that you looked like someone that you knew.
Yeah. So in this specific case, the person who wrote the code added the same address as a CC in all emails with the HHH we are seeing in the screenshot, and it helped recognize the email, but he could totally he could have not inserted this this address, and in that case, it would have been more complicated to recognize the emails. And he could also have changed the text every time in the email and so on. So yeah, next time it happens, maybe it won't be so easy to track down the issue and create filters to block it and so on and so on.
Yeah, it's sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. I've changed headset now.
Yeah.
It is worrying how you know, it was a big relief for me that this wasn't actually Google Apps Script behind this, because quite often it is. So I think it's going to increasingly create headaches for Google, but hopefully as a consequence they don't close what, you know, things that we use down for Apps Script, but we just have to wait and see. So I think that's it for the news. So at the top of the show, I mentioned that we wanted to do something around Firebase. So this is, I think we're on plan G now with the number of technical issues we've had. But so how far we get through with this demo, I don't know. But
no, we didn't do any demo or anything. We were waiting for you.
Well, so we'll see how. So this is just I put my hand up and say I haven't really used Firebase until this morning. So this is very much my ways of, you know, just using Firebase. I did write something not too long ago about how you could use, based on something RealEd actually produced on how you can use Firebase for a logger. But this example is looking at how you can just simply read and write data to Firebase. So first thing to highlight, Firebase is not just a database. There's a whole list of services, and in the show we do next time, we're going to do cloud functions for Firebase. So that's another feature. Spencer Easton has done cloud Firebase hosting. So this is just another feature of Firebase. So in terms of the database, it's if you come from or use ScriptDB back in the day, which is now no longer with us, Firebase databases are the same sort of format. They're NoSQL based, so they don't have a formal structure. So if you've got problems that fit that kind of gap, then Firebase is worth looking at. In fact, before I should say, so in terms of my cribbing I did this morning, I basically used, Romain's got a wonderful tutorial on Firebase, so I just basically went through that. And I borrowed stuff from Bruce. So Bruce had Bruce has been using an abstraction DB service where you can plant in lots of different databases in. So we'll share a link to the slides after the show so you can go through this yourselves. To show you the process, because there are some, with any interface, it can be problematic sometimes finding where things are. So I'm just going to share my screen and hopefully get a verbal nod. Oh, sorry, let me stop doing that. Some editing for me to do after the show. So hopefully you can see. So this is just the Firebase console. So before we get started, we're just going to create a new project. So the quotas on Firebase are very flexible. So I've got a slide at the end that's got these. So basically they have a free program. So we're just going to, sorry, it helps if you click on the right screen. We're just going to create a project here. So the project name you give will basically be form part of the URLs that we use later on. So I'm just going to create a project. So Firebase is going off and setting up everything that we need, and basically now the project's created. So you can see immediately we've got all the other Firebase tools here, but the one we're interested in is the database. So in terms of what we want to do in next steps, now that we've created the database, is in this demonstration, I'm just going to, I want to grab a couple of bits of information. So the first bit is the URL. So this is when you're making calls to the Firebase, you include a URL. So that's included for us here. So let me just jump to another window. So I'm just gonna put in as a variable for our script project. So let's just go facts. And paste code later on. So the next thing we need is a secret. So this will allow us to write data to our database from AppScript. So in Romain's example, we actually allowed to set the database to an open write mode, but I'm just going to show you where to get the secret, because it's not entirely straightforward. So the secret is just an access key. To get this, you need to go into the cog on your project, go into project settings, and we need to go into service accounts. And you'll see in here there is a database secret. If I just click on show. So my first question to Romain is that this warning here, database secrets are currently deprecated. So how's that going to impact this flow in future? Do you need to do an OAuth flow, or will these secrets always be available to use in your projects?
So it won't be an OAuth flow. In fact, so those secrets are now in a service accounts part of the UI, and so you can replace these simple secrets, simple string, not very long, by like a more complex string. So if you create a new service account, Google will give you an email address specific to this service account, plus I don't like a very more complex key that you will also be able to enter in the database, in the information to connect. So this means that the flow will be the same. You won't have to go through another URL to authorize through an OAuth flow or whatever. But we are using this new mechanism in part of this Firebase app library, mainly because when we work together on it with Spencer, we needed it to be able to authenticate user on the client side using the new JavaScript SDK for Firebase. Well, whatever. The thing is, at the moment, in my documentation, in the tutorials, and so on, we are still promoting the use of the old secret keys, simply because they are a bit faster to set up, and also because it won't, even if Google has indicated that it's deprecated, it's mainly because it's not as strong of a security as the use of real service accounts. So Google prefer you to use the service accounts, but they haven't shut down those secrets yet. And if they implement big changes to the Firebase database, maybe when they will bring Firebase database v2 at some point or something like that, maybe those will be deprecated. But before that, we can continue to use secrets as usual. So for me, as long as Firebase DB exists like it is today, secrets will also exist like they exist today.
Okay. So that, I think, good news. So given how easy it is to grab that, and I've just pasted it in the code. So the next bit is there is no advanced service or service within AppScript for Firebase. So we have to load the library for it. So as Romain mentioned, this is something that they've put together. He's put together with Spencer. So from Romain's website, you'll get the ID for the library, and we're just going to select the latest version. So what that then allows us to do, so we will have the autocomplete for Firebase, and you can see basically the first thing to do is to get the database by URL. So the URL we just set up as a variable, and the secret we've set up as a variable. So I'm just going to set this as a variable. equals. And so fingers crossed, no complete on that. Let's not worry about that too much. So we've now got a set of functions that we can use now that we've got access to the database. I'm just going to drop in some pre-prepared data. In Romain's example, he just pulled out some spreadsheet data. So this can be, a form submit, wherever you want. So in terms of setting the data, this is really straightforward. So we can just drop in this line. So we're calling this set data. The first variable is a path. So if you want to specify a path in the data, you can, and then you can just send in the data. So if I run this, we'll get prompted by our new authentication flow. So it's going to ask me to select the account, and because we're the Firebase app will be using URL fetch, we're connecting to an external service. So this is running away, and then fingers crossed, if I can find the right tab within the many I have. Let me just pull up a new one. Drop this in. So when we go into the database, we can see that it's put all the countries in. So it's basically dropped those objects in, and it's quite nice the fact that we've got a browser here to look at the data. So we can see the structure of the data. We can see the data is in there correctly. So that's all very straightforward. So the last bit, so we're using a set data command there. There's another command just to highlight called push data. So this caused a bit of issues for me when I was learning this morning, because I was trying to push data in. So if we run this, what push data does is actually put the data in and generate an automatic key for this. So this could be useful in other situations where you want to have storage and you want a random key assigned to it. You can see the data is actually structured within that key. With the push data command, you'll basically get that key back, so you could store it as a variable. So there's another option within setting data to actually update the data. There's an update data command as well if you want to just update part of a record. So in this case, I'm going to change the fact that the England region, which was set to Europe, given what's happening currently, we're going to change it to UK. So again, when I jump back into the database, we can see this is now set to UK. So it's all very straightforward. So the last bit is a bit more setup required. So now we say you've got a ton of data in your database and you want to query back a certain part of it. So there's a couple of steps that you need to do. So the first step is you need to tell Firebase what you're going to index the data on. So within the rules, when you look at Romain's example, it shows you how you can use these rules for setting up different write access and read access. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say index, and in this case I'm going to actually pull a couple of an array. So the thing that was foxing me this morning was that the dots are important. so it doesn't give the most meaningful error message. So if you haven't got the dot, you're going to be in problems. So that rule is now published, and what that means is we can now query the data based on some of the object properties. So what I'm going to do is query the data on when the region is equal to North America. So if I just run that, and if I go into the logs, so we can see in here, it's pulled back the 2 records where it's North America. So this is my next question for you, Romain. So my understanding was that it's quite limited in terms of how you can query. So to specify that we're querying records equal to North America, we have to specify order by is the region. Is that correct?
Yes. Every time you want to do a query to try to get a specific key value pair, you need to have at least two parameters in your query. So in this example, for example, order by and equal to. I haven't, sorry, I haven't followed it. In this case, it did work or not?
Yep. So it pulled back just, so there was a, if I just comment out that one, so just to make it a bit easier to see. So it pulled back.
Yeah. So yeah, the query part of Firebase is pretty limited, especially when you start to have a very big database. Because if you have a very big database, it will take too much time to actually run a query across a large part of your database. So in my experience, but again, it's mostly because we have big Firebase databases. For Yetuzo Melmerge, for example, the database is more than 1.7 gigabytes, so it's kind of a big JSON. And on this database, I can't really use queries. So instead, I used what is sorry, I'm denormalizing the data, meaning that, for example, I will have part of my DB with all the countries, and another part of the DB with all the regions. And so if I want to get information on a specific region, I will directly look at the information in the region path and not in the country parts of the DB. Are we still live or not?
It looks like Martin has disappeared.
Yeah, and I still have the live indicator.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will assume that we are still live, and we'll try to. So Martin is back.
I would just to add to what Romain said. The thing about Firebase, it's not like a regular database where the main way to access it is via queries. The main way to access it is via a path. So if you look back at your example where you had regions and all the rest of it, the path that you would look at would be as far down as you could go to partition the data into a small amount. So it's a little bit different than that, and that's why I know that those of us that are used to databases are used to normalizing databases, where you get rid of duplication, and although that you can, you've got lots of links and so on and so forth. With Firebase, it's not like that. You have duplication so that you can order things in the way that you're likely want to be able to access it. But having said all of that, if you do that, it's very, very fast. If you do queries where it's got to look at the whole thing, it's kind of slow. So in your query that you used there, Martin, you could have looked at the path that included region rather than trying to do an index in a query.
Yeah, and when I need to really analyze all the data in the database, I actually do a backup. So I download a very big JSON file, and I do my queries on this local copy of the DB rather than actually on the real Firebase DB, because if I was doing the queries I'm doing in this specific case, the database would go down for a while for all the other users, and that's something I want to happen.
Before I crash out again, I'll just conclude by saying, so the quotas on the free, so you allowed 100 simultaneous connections, you're allowed a gig of storage and 10 gigabyte a month on the databases. So there's lots potentially to play with.
Hey, you may want to share your screen again, Martin. I don't think you are.
I don't know if I should risk it.
Oh, okay.
This is probably the opportune point to pass to Romain. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, okay.
Better luck than I did.
So as we introduced a bit Firebase, I just wanted to mention how I'm using it and why I'm using it mostly in my add-on YAMM mail merge. So first, I'm using it as a kind of replacement of ScriptDB to save information about each user. So I have all my users' profiles in Firebase, but you could use other databases than Firebase for that. Why I decided to go with Firebase is mostly because of the real-time capabilities of the database. And I'm going to show you this with YAMM mail merge right now. So just 1 second. Yay. So is everyone able to see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so here in Gmail, I have a little draft that I will use in YAMM mail merge. And for this campaign, I choose to email all the people working on the team here. So I will all send you an email, and we should be able to see in real time if you are opening the email, answering it, and so on. First, YAMM mail merge is a mail merge tool that can send a lot of emails, and I wanted people to know exactly what was happening on server side from the UI. And for that, I didn't want to do back and forth between the client and the server every time an email was sent, but I wanted still to tell people when an email was sent. So from the server side in AppScript, every time a new email is sent, it updates a specific number in Firebase, and the client-side part of the add-on is watching this part of the DB, and so every time the number is incremented by the server without having to return anything from AppScript to the client and stop the script from running, Firebase will let the client side know that the email has been opened, has been sent. So if I click on send email, you can see a little progress bar, and every time a new email will be sent, I can see in real time that they are being sent. So here the 5 emails sent. And after that, we have a little sidebar here, and I can see that Steve has opened and then clicked the email. And if Martin and Bruce want to try it, they should also be able to find the email in their mailbox and maybe click or open and unsubscribe or answer to the email or whatever. The thing is, you can see that the sidebar here is updated in real time thanks to Firebase. So every time someone opens an email, we record an information in Firebase, and as the client side of the app of Get from the Mail Merge is using Firebase in real time, we get the info, and then I use a simple Google Scripts run command to update also the info in the spreadsheets. That's all.
And that really is a wow factor for me, because you're updating the database, and then based on some odd event on the client side, it's bang, it's there. I just think that's, I don't know if there's any other tools or methods that can actually do that.
Good question. I suppose there are, but yeah, Firebase was really easy to implement, and while it has the additional benefit of being part of the Google ecosystem, meaning that all the data are stored on Google servers. I only pay one bill, and everything is connected to the same Cloud Console project and so on. So for me, it was a real benefit.
Great stuff. Bruce, did you want to come in with anything on that?
I just wanted to say that the way that you generally interact with Firebase is interesting as well, because because it's a real-time database, it's driven by events. So in other words, if anybody updates, there's a kind of a copy of the database kept in your client. So if anything gets updated on the regular one, it synchronizes to your client and then calls back a function in your app, which then is able to react to a change that's been made. So in fact, you're being told about changes that get made to the database. You're not actually going to check. So it's kind of a push notification is what's happening. It's a really, really good, it's really nicely done, actually.
Yeah, it's actually using WebSockets. And yes, it's way better than having to pull data every seconds or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, great example. We've actually got a bit of time left. So, Bruce, you've also got another example of using Firebase with some frameworks.
Actually, yeah. Give me a second till I just get there. I don't know where it is right now. We've got.
While you do that, I have one other question for Romain. Can you monitor more than one click in your email messages, or is it limited to one-click events?
No, we could monitor. Well, this is not exactly related to AppScript. So we Well, no, because we couldn't make a redirect. We could use Cloud Functions for that. But anyway, what I'm doing is simply, so when you create your draft in Gmail, and then you use YAMM to send the email, I will get the draft, find the links, find the URL in this draft, replace those URLs by a specific URL of web service that I own. And so when I will send the emails, then when a recipient will save it, open it, and click on the link, it will go through my server first. I will record the fact that he has opened the email, and then I will redirect him to the original internet URL. And as I can add different parameters in the URL, I can track who has opened the email, to which campaign it is linked, to which URL it should be redirected, and so on. And I can handle as many URLs as you want. In fact, within weird emails being sent with YAMM, yet another mail merge, and some people are like have more than like 100 links in their emails. I don't know the purpose of that, but whatever, we're handling that.
Okay, well, thank you. Because I know usually when you send an email, you want like one call to action instead of 100. But all right, thank you. Back to Bruce, I guess.
I just got a question. So Jacob is on the YouTube chat, and so he was wondering if there was more you could say about how the Firebase updates the client side without the client side actually querying for updates.
Yeah, so this is not related to AppScript. You need to use the official and very standard JavaScript SDK client side of Firebase. And if you go through the documentation, the official Firebase documentation, you will see that you can create a specific listener, on listener to be notified every time a specific value or a specific part of your DB, a specific path of your DB is receiving an update. If a new child is added as a specific path in the DB, or removed or updated. There are many different ways to watch information, and it's very easy to activate on the client side.
Another great example of how HTML service is enabling the AppScript community to do, with a lot of existing JavaScript client libraries out there.
Totally.
So hopefully that answers your question. And Bruce, I don't know if that leads on to what you're doing, but anyway, we'll give the mic to you.
Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about Firebase authentication, because that provides in my opinion, a very simplified OAuth type flow. Again, it uses the JavaScript client, so you're running on the HTML service, whether it's an add-on or something like that. I also want to talk a little bit about React, Redux, and Material UI. I mean, they're not AppScript things, but if you're writing HTML service things, then you're probably going to be using some kind of framework. Some people use Polymer, some people use also Angular, some people use all sorts of things. I find that React, which is a little bit like Polymer, is pretty good. And Redux is a way to formalize your communication between your HTML objects and your backend data store. So it avoids the problem of asynchronously updating the same thing from multiple places. So I'm not going to go into those things too much. I just want to talk about Firebase authentication, but I had to mention that so we could set the scene. So if we move on to the next slide, let's see.
Bruce, I think you just muted yourself in the process of. We can see the next slide.
Yeah, I sure did. Yeah, you got me now?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. So one of the things that Firebase does for you is to keep a list of all your users and their email addresses, which means you don't have to, which is pretty cool. So it means that you can set up a system that has got registered users for whom you don't ever have to care about their email addresses. You never have to store it because Firebase does. And in fact, what you do is this is the same console that Martin was showing earlier, except it's the authentication part of it. So this is a list of users that subscribe to one of my apps, and I refer to them by the user UID, not by their email. I never look at their email. So that's a good place to start and a good place to be. And if you want to enrich that data, which I do, you can use the Firebase internal ID for someone to then store stuff against in a separate Firebase database against that Firebase UID. So again, you don't have to keep email addresses in your own database or anywhere else, which is pretty cool. So how does all that work? First of all, just before we look at the code, I'm going to just flip over to an app that's using it. Hopefully you can see that, can you?
Yeah.
Okay. So actually what this is, it's a cross-platform cache, and it kind of does some of the things that Firebase does, actually, that we were talking about earlier. It does have push notification of changes, but it's also got the ability to push notify AppScript through sending a post message to it. So although you can do the same thing in terms of waking people up, waking an app up that's running the JavaScript client, you can also wake AppScript up by sending a post message to it. So it's supposed to be a cache that can be used by any platform, essentially. But I do use Firebase with it a little bit, and I use it for authentication and for keeping track of registered users. So to sign in, you can see up at the top, I'm signed in. I've signed in using Firebase. And if I want to sign out, I just do that and I'm gone. And if I want to sign back in again, I just do that. It brings up the Firebase authentication. If it didn't know me, it would ask for the usual stuff there about, do you want to allow this thing to happen? But it knew me, so therefore it allowed me, and that's signed in. So that's all there is to it. And this is running React and Redux behind the scene. So we go back now to the slides. And we'll take a little look at the code. This won't make a tremendous amount of sense if you don't know React, but I just wanted to show how straightforward it is to use the authentication API, although it won't look that way if you're not familiar with this kind of approach. So really the way things work within React is that it's a kind of a mixture of HTML and JavaScript in the same place. So it's exactly the opposite of what we're used to doing, which is to separate HTML and JavaScript. This mixes them up, and in fact, you create components which you can then reuse throughout your application in various places. So the render function, the render method here, is what creates the thing that gets displayed on the page. And in fact, in my case, it's not what gets displayed in the page, but what gets displayed in that little chip, which was my picture plus my name. So this is the function that does that. And we'll take a look at what happens if we're logged in, and we know that from Firebase is keeping track of it. Then that means that we're trying to log out. So therefore, I set up a chip, and you can see in the bottom what a logged in chip looks like, which is then going to log us out. And then if I'm not logged in, I need to create a signed in chip, which is what we have here. So I'm not going into this code at all, but I'm going to just quickly go to what sign in and sign up does. We have to use Redux at this point, and as I said earlier, Redux is a thing that controls access to a central store of all the data in your app. So all you do when you want to do something with Redux is you dispatch a function to it. That takes care of it. and then puts the answer in a central place you can access later on. So that's the simple sign out and sign in and sign out. Now we'll get to the Firebase bit now, and you can see that this is all there is to it, apart from a little bit of setup to do that entire authentication process. First thing you need to do is to set up the provider. Now, Firebase has multiple providers. It's not just using Google. You can also log in using Facebook or GitHub and various other providers as well. I happen to want to use the Google provider, so that's what I'm doing here. And then once I've set that up, I simply call sign in with pop-up, which then goes ahead and works through the mechanism of finding out if someone has already logged in. If they haven't, then it'll ask them their username and password and so on. And then that's it. This is where the cool part comes in, because I think we mentioned earlier that you listen for things in Firebase rather than check for things. So to determine whether or not someone has actually gone through the process of logging in, you set up this callback here and you listen for it. And if the auth state changes, which means that the guy has gone from being logged in to not logged in, or vice versa, then it calls me, and I can just call my function that processes someone having logged in, which was what we looked at earlier, to change the little avatar and so on, passing to it the user who had just logged in. And the cool thing is that Firebase passes also its user ID and anything else that I'm storing about it as well. So I think that's could well be all I have. Yep, that's it. I didn't want to get into the code too much because, as I say, we could have been here for a long time. But in principle, it's just being able to use Firebase not only to handle the auth login, but to take care of calling you back when there's something interesting to do. And the other part that's quite good is that you can see now that you're able to use Firebase across pretty much any platform that can speak JavaScript. And that's pretty much it.
It's a really nice example. I wasn't aware of the I'm learning a lot today. I wasn't aware of the authentication aspect.
Yes, it's an entirely it's an easier way of doing OAuth, if you like. It's not really the same flow, but it's an easier way of doing it than what you've been used to through the regular Google OAuth flow.
So with some of the calls you were doing there, and I noticed you were creating a new Firebase instance. So are you using the Firebase client library within?
Yes, yeah, that's all stuff out of the client library.
Yeah. Impressive stuff.
Anything else?
Steve, Romain, anything you want to chip in on that?
Just the concept of having a cache cross platforms like that is very nice.
Well, I think we owe Bruce, given all his contributions, a dedicated show on Ethereal Exchange. So we should work on that one. Unfortunately, it won't be our next show, which we have a date for, and fingers crossed will run technically smoother. So our rescheduled show with Real and Romain is on the 9th of June, starting at the same time. So we hope you'll be able to join us for that. I think this is going to be an interesting edit, this show. I think it may come down to 30 minutes at the end after I remove all the times my computer froze or stalled. Like Steve, my internet disappeared, so I'm now on a mobile internet connection. So fingers crossed everything goes more smoothly next time, and we hope you can join us. Thank you to contributions from Steve, Romain, and Bruce, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
And good luck.